real number properties. We have the commutative property. Commute means to move back and forth. You commute back and forth to school. So the commutative property is about order. If I have 3 plus 5, that would be the same thing as 5 plus 3. I can switch the order. That would also be true of multiplication. 4 times 5 is exactly the same thing as 5 times 4. It's about the order. The associative property is about associating numbers together. We like to group them together with parentheses. So this is about grouping. If I have 1 plus 3 plus 5, and I want to add 1 and 3 together first, order of operations says to do the parentheses first and then to do adding. That would be the same thing as 1 plus, this time I'd like to group together 3 and 5. So 1 plus 3 in parentheses plus 5 is the same thing as 1 plus, in parentheses, 3 plus 5. All we have to do is check this to see if it's true. Order of operations says to start with parentheses first. So 1 plus 3 is 4. And then 4 plus 5 is 9. Do I get the same thing on the other side? We start with parentheses. So I have 1 plus 3 plus 5 is 8. And then 1 plus 8 is 9. Check. I get the same thing. So the associative property is about grouping. This could also be seen with multiplication. Let's do 2 times 3 times 5 equals 2 times, in parentheses this time, 3 times 5. All right, let's check to see how this is going to work out. We start with parentheses first. 2 times 3 is 6 times 5, and 6 times 5 is 30. Let's see if we get the same thing on the other side. Starting with inside the parentheses, so we have 2 times 3 times 5 is 15, and then 2 times 15 equals 30. Yes, it works. The associative property is about grouping. The next property that we have is the identity property. I am what I am and nothing else. So the identity is about getting back what you started with. If I have 5, what do I need to add to 5 to get back 5? 5 plus what is 5? 5 plus 0 is 5. So the identity property is about adding 0 to a number and getting back what you started with. How about multiplication? 8 times what is going to equal 8? When we're multiplying, we're not going to multiply by 0 because 8 times 0 would be 0. So 8 times what is going to give me back my 8 for the identity? 8 times 1 equals 8. So we have the identity property. We also have the 0 property. The 0 property states that 4 times 0 equals 0. That's it. So we see the 0 property is about multiplying by 0, and that equals 0. That is the 0 property. Yes, they have a name for it. All right, the distributive property is used a lot in math. And the distributive property would be a problem like 2 times x plus 5. Now, order of operations says that we start in parentheses. X plus 5. Can I add a variable with a number? No, I cannot. I can only add x's with x's and numbers with numbers. I cannot add x plus 5. So the next thing that we're going to do then, order of operations says, are there any parentheses? Yes, but there's nothing in there to do. Are there any exponents? No. Is there any multiplying or dividing? Yes, I see 2 times the parentheses. The distributive property is about distributing this 2 onto the x. 2 times x equals 2x, and then distributing the 2 onto the 5. So 2 times 5 equals a positive 10. If I have 2 terms on the inside of the parentheses, then I will have 2 terms when I am done using the distributive property. So the distributive property is about distributing a number to the terms that are on the inside of the parentheses. I could have more than 2 terms on the inside of the parenthesis. For example, we could have x times 3 plus 5 plus 8. X times 3 equals 3x. X times 5 equals 5x. And x times 8 equals 8x. Can I add x's with x's? Yes, I can. I could add all these together. 3x plus 5x is 8x, and 8x plus 8x is 16x. Here, at the end of my answer, I have an x plus a number. I cannot add those together. I can only add x's with x's. Let's do one more example. How about 4 times x plus 3 plus 2x? 4 times x is 4x. We put them right next to each other to show multiplication. 4 times 3 is a positive 12. And 4 times 2x is a positive 8x. Do I have anything in this expression that I could simplify? I see that I do have something that I could combine together. I have an x term, 4x plus 8x. 4x plus 8x equals 12x, and then I still have plus 12. Final answer. We have the inverse property. Okay, the inverse property is about when it's addition, we're talking about the opposite. So 3 plus the opposite of 3, which would be negative 3. The inverse property is about adding the opposite. 3 plus the opposite of 3, and that equals 0. The multiplication property, we're doing, let's say, 4 times the reciprocal of 4. The reciprocal of 4 is 1/4. 1/4 of 4 equals 1. If I made 4 a fraction and cross cancel, you would see that we get 1. So we have the inverse property. That was the real number properties. We can look over here to see what properties that we have. 11 plus 0 equals 11. 11 plus something gives me back 11. That's the identity property of addition. Identity property of addition. We have x times y times z, x times y times z. I see that y and z are first grouped together, and then the x and the y are grouped together. Which property is about grouping terms together? That would be the grouping, would be the associative property. So we know it's the associative property of what? Addition or multiplication? We're looking for the associative property of multiplication. 8 plus -8. All right, we have another property to do here. And that would be the inverse property. 8 plus the opposite of 8. That would be the inverse property, and we get 0 at the end. That would be the inverse property of addition. Inverse addition, that would be H. 14 plus 20 equals 20 plus 14. The order has switched. Which property is about order? That would be the commutative property of addition. Commutative property of addition. 2 times the reciprocal of 2. 2 times a half equals 1. That would be the inverse property of multiplication. Inverse property of multiplication. 22 times 1 equals 22. I started with 22 and I got 22 back. That would be the identity property of multiplying by 1 is the identity property of multiplication. Identity property of multiplication. 19 plus 12 plus 8, and then 19 plus 12 plus 8. We see that 9 and 12 are first grouped together, and then 12 and 8 are grouped together. Which property is about grouping? That would be the associative property of addition. Associative property of addition. A times 9 equals 9 times A. The order has changed. First it was A times 9, and then it switched to 9 times A. Which property is about order? That would be the commutative property of multiplication. Commutative property of multiplication. 7 times 4 plus 11, and then we see 7 times 4 plus 7 times 11. The 7 has been distributed on to the 4 and the 11. 7 times 4 plus 7 times 11. That would be the distributive property. How do we use these properties? Use the properties of real number to help simplify each expression mentally. How do I use these properties? Well, I see that I'd like to group 15 and 5 together. 19 plus 15 plus 5. I'd like to group 5 and 15 together because it gives me a nice number that ends in a 0. 20 plus 39. 20, 39. What would I like to put together here? 23 minus 3 would be good grouped together. It helps you to add up numbers quickly if we use compatible numbers. 23 minus 3 is 20 plus 48. 48, 58, 68. All right, what would we like to see next to each other? $9.50 and 50 cents. $9.50 plus 50 cents plus 11.49. $9.50 plus 50 would be 10, and $10 plus $11.49 would be $21.49. All right, 9 quarters, that's kind of an odd number out, but 4 quarters is more of an even number. So let's put together, use the commutative property. Let's use the associative property to regroup. Let's put 25 times 4 together. 4 quarters is 100, times 9 is 900. Let's see here, negative 50 cents and positive 50 cents. Let's regroup these together. If I spend 50 cents and then somebody gives me 50 cents, or if I have 50 cents and I spend 50 cents, how much do I have left? This would be 0 plus 9.89 would be 9.89. I would like to put 8 and 5 together first. That would be 40 times 6. 6 times 4 is 24, so 6 times 40 would be 240.